If you were not looking closely at Jason's eyes in that final scene when he reunited with his son Danny, you completely missed the real story. Everyone was so focused on the emotional father-son embrace, but did you catch that cold, distant, almost haunted stare over the boy's shoulder? That was not the look of a man who was simply relieved to be home after a harrowing ordeal with the WSB. That was the calculated, guarded gaze of a man who is still very much a prisoner in his own mind. And the fact that he has completely ignored Britt since his return, that is absolutely not an accident. If you ask me, Jason's entire physical demeanor screams that he is hiding a massive, life-altering secret, and the writers are leaving breadcrumbs right in front of us. When you look at the way he holds his posture, stiff and unrelenting, it implies that this man is carrying a burden far heavier than typical post-traumatic stress. I look at this current situation as a highly dangerous psychological deadlock for all the characters involved. We have Jason, finally released from WSB custody thanks to the secret deal brokered by Jocelyn with the enigmatic WSB head known as Z. For months, the anticipation of Jason's return in the milestone 16,000th episode has been building to a fever pitch. Fans, myself included, naturally assumed that upon his release, one of his very first stops would be to see Britt. Britt has been going through absolute hell, from being falsely diagnosed with a fatal disease by a manipulated saline syringe, to facing severe legal crises, to mourning the supposed death of her brother, Cassius. You would think Jason, knowing her vulnerable state, would rush to her side. Yet, the reality we are watching unfold is a stark contrast. Jason has returned fundamentally changed, and his sole focus has shifted entirely to Danny, leaving Britt completely out in the cold. This sudden shift in priorities is a glaring red flag that we simply cannot ignore. Yes, Jason wants to protect Danny, even going so far as to announce his departure from the mob life, which left Sonny completely stunned. But completely freezing out Britt? That feels like a calculated move rather than a natural emotional progression. When you analyze the psychological motive here, it does not track with the Jason we have known for decades. He is fiercely loyal to the people he cares about. If he loved Britt, he would at least check on her, especially knowing the trauma she just endured with the cold fusion nightmare and her terrifying incarceration. Instead, he maintains a rigid, impenetrable wall between them. This implies that there is an ulterior motive at play, a hidden agenda that Jason is desperately trying to conceal from everyone, especially those he once held dear. He is not just pushing her away, he is actively ensuring she has no part in his new reality. So, what could possibly force Jason to act this way? Could it be that during his agonizing time in WSB custody, he encountered someone from his past? Someone who changes the entire trajectory of his life? If you ask me, all signs point to a ghost. I am talking about Sam. We have all operated under the assumption that Sam was gone, a tragic casualty of the dangerous lives they lead. But what if she never truly left us? What if the WSB, under the ruthless leadership of Z, has been secretly holding Sam captive this entire time? Imagine the psychological torment Jason must have felt if Z paraded a living, breathing Sam in front of him behind the fortified walls of a WSB black site. This would instantly explain his shattered trust in the world and his absolute refusal to engage with his former life. If Z is holding Sam hostage, she becomes the ultimate leverage against a man who is otherwise unbreakable. The WSB does not just let highly skilled operatives like Jason walk away freely without strings attached. Jocelyn may have brokered a deal for his release, but Z is a master manipulator who plays three-dimensional chess while everyone else is playing checkers. Z could have easily approached Jason in the dark of night and laid out a chilling ultimatum: work for the WSB, complete a highly classified, off-the-books mission, or Sam pays the ultimate price. In this scenario, Jason cannot breathe a word of this to anyone. Not to Sonny, not to Danny, and certainly not to Britt. One wrong move, one leaked whisper, and Sam's life is forfeited. This is the unforeseen fallout of his release. Jason is not ignoring Britt because he stopped caring. He is ignoring her because his entire existence is now consumed by the desperate need to save the mother of his child. Think about the emotional weight of this possibility and how it frames every single interaction he has had since coming home. Jason's intense, singular focus on Danny suddenly makes perfect sense. He is not just trying to be a good father in the present, he is meticulously laying the groundwork for a future reunion. He wants to rebuild his family. He wants to bring Sam home and raise their son together, far away from the violence of the mob organization. Leaving the mob is step 1 in this grand design. Completing Z's sinister mission is step 2. But what exactly is this mission that requires a man of Jason's lethal talents? To figure that out, we have to look at the other major lingering mystery in town, the fate of Cassius, the man who spent months impersonating a beloved detective and fooling everyone around him. This brings us to Scenario A. As we have heavily speculated in the past, Cassius is not actually dead. The tears shed by James, Nina, and Britt were based on a meticulously crafted lie designed to let him slip away. Cassius is secretly alive and likely operating as a ghost asset for the WSB. But here is the catch. The WSB, and Z in particular, do not trust Cassius. He is a wild card, a man with deep, complicated ties to the town, and a history of unpredictable, highly dangerous behavior. If Cassius decides to go rogue, or if he attempts to return to town to reclaim his life or expose the WSB's dirty operations, Z needs a contingency plan. It looks like Jason is exactly that contingency plan. Could it be that Jason's top secret mission is to track, monitor, and ultimately neutralize Cassius if he steps out of line? In Scenario A, Jason is essentially functioning as the WSB's lethal leash on Cassius. Jason has been ordered to ensure that Cassius never sets foot in town again. If Cassius tries to make contact with his sister Britt, or if he tries to reach out to James, Jason is tasked with stopping him by any means necessary. This implies a deadly game of cat and mouse playing out in the shadows, far away from the prying eyes of the local police. If Cassius refuses to stay away, Jason might be ordered to silence him permanently. Just imagine the sheer gravity of that mandate. Jason, a man trying to leave his violent past behind to save Sam, is forced to become a government assassin, hunting down the brother of the woman who recently held his heart. It is a brilliant, twisted narrative web that forces Jason into an impossible moral corner with no easy way out. Now, let us pivot and examine Scenario B. If Jason is indeed hunting Cassius under the threat of Sam's execution, his behavior toward Britt takes on a completely different, much more tragic meaning. In Scenario B, Jason's coldness is not a sign of indifference. It is a desperate, calculated measure of protection. Britt is Cassius's sister. She has already been devastated by his supposed death and the horrifying revelation that he was an imposter. If Jason gets close to Britt, he risks exposing his mission. Even worse, if Z suspects that Jason is compromised by his lingering feelings for Britt, Z might view Britt as a liability and order her elimination as well. Jason knows that proximity to him equals death, and he will not let Britt become collateral damage in a war she does not even know is happening. Therefore, it looks like Jason is intentionally breaking Britt's heart to save her life. By completely freezing her out, by acting as though she means absolutely nothing to him, he ensures that the WSB keeps their eyes off her. He cannot risk Britt asking questions, investigating his odd behavior, or accidentally stumbling upon the truth about Cassius and Sam. We all know Britt is incredibly resourceful and fiercely protective of her family. If she caught even a whiff that Cassius was alive and that Jason was hunting him, she would throw herself directly into the line of fire to save her brother. Jason is bearing the psychological agony of this isolation so that Britt can have a fresh start, perhaps even with the newly arrived doctor. Tristan, completely free from the WSB's lethal crosshairs, he is taking the role of the villain in her story so she can survive to write her own next chapter. The cruel irony of this entire situation is palpable and deeply heartbreaking. Britt is sitting there, trying to rebuild her life after the cold fusion disaster, the fake disease diagnosis, and the trauma of her incarceration. She likely feels abandoned by Jason, wondering why the man she cared for has turned into a stranger who cannot even look her in the eye. She has no idea that his silence is a shield. She has no idea that every time Jason looks at Danny, he is thinking about Sam, and every time he looks away from her, he is trying to keep her brother's executioner at bay. This is the epitome of a shattered trust built on a foundation of forced nobility. Jason is sacrificing his own happiness and his reputation in Britt's eyes to manage a crisis that nobody else even knows exists, carrying the weight of multiple lives on his shoulders. So, Where does this leave our characters in the grand scheme of things? If you ask me, this storyline is a ticking time bomb waiting to decimate everyone involved. Jason is walking a tightrope over an active volcano. He is trying to appease Z, protect Danny, save Sam, and keep Britt in the dark while hunting a ghost like Cassius. But secrets have a funny way of clawing their way to the surface when you least expect them to. Will Jason be forced to pull the trigger on Cassius? And if he does, what happens when Britt inevitably uncovers the truth? Will she ever forgive him, or will this be the final, fatal blow to any hope of their reconciliation? I highly doubt this ends with a neat, happy bow. The WSB rarely leaves its pawns unscarred, and Jason might just find that the price of saving one family is the total destruction of another. We will just have to watch and see how much collateral damage Z is willing to inflict before the dust finally settles.